So okay, so I'm gonna make you dig a little bit. So when you
Okay.
bought those CDs, do you remember how much they cost you?
I think they're like 15.99, 16.
Yep.
They were expensive. Well, not. I mean,
No, they were. You're
that was
not
expensive
wrong.
actually. Yeah, that is expensive actually. Yeah,
It would get worse, but
yeah.
we'll get there.
I found
But
ways
it
around that. Yeah.
yeah, but oh, I know, but I mean, but at first they were listing them in 1982 at 16.99 a piece.
In '82,
That's how much they were. Yeah, they were.
you would think they'd be a little cheaper back in '82 because of the inflation, but
Well, the scary thing is that they don't cost any more than about 250 to make.
oh yeah, they're gonna get their money. Yeah,
They
it's a,
don't. They cost nothing to
I
make
guess
them.
it's smart because I
Nothing.
figure it's a brand new thing. It's a new sensation, so
Oh yeah,
people are gonna pay for it. So I mean, why not?
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's exactly what it was. But
Mhm.
it was madness, and they stayed up there for a long time. So still at the beginning, like I remember I was at a record world. Um, I'm getting old. I can't remember these things as easily as I once could. But and I remember getting "Don't Be Cruel" by Bobby Brown.
Nice. One of my
I
favorite.
heard My Prerogative on the radio
Hmm.
and decided that I needed this.
Hmm.
And so I went in, and the tape was like $8 or $9. It was $9. It was
Hmm.
$9. But I hadn't heard anything else off the record yet because the first
Right.
thing to come off the record was "It's My Prerogative," and
Hmm.
that was enough for me right there.
Hmm.
Um, and so I bought the tape, and actually for a tape, it doesn't sound bad to be
Hmm.
honest with you. But I got the tape home. I didn't have a car at that point, so I was just on the train,
Okay.
and I got home and I put the tape in, and I fell in love with it deeply because it's "Don't Be Cruel." You all did. You know you did.
Yeah.
And I had to save up for the CD, and I went right back there to that record world and bought the CD, and it's
Blew the cassette tape away.
completely blew it away. It's
Yeah.
such a good sounding record anyway. I mean, so much of, I know this kind of goes off a bit, I know, but there's a lot of really good sounding, like really good sounding R&B music back
Right.
then. And the stuff was just recorded so well and mastered so well. I mean, if you listen to like the beginning of Rock With You, like it's one of the crispiest CDs I own. It's so good. The separation is so good. Yeah,
Hmm.
I know it was a drum machine and sequencers and keyboards and everything, but it sounds so good. It's one of the most perfectly recorded things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
It's just, and with headphones, bruh.
I remember the first time I heard "Walk On by Isaac Hayes. I had these headphones. They were expensive headphones. They were back. Sony made these big headphones back then. This is way before Beats was a
Those
thing.
MDRs, I know
They were
them.
pretty.
Yes,
They were pretty good headphones back then. I remember
sure.
listening to "Walk On By." I was doing. I don't even remember what I was doing or why I was even listening to that particular song. And I was doing homework though, and I had my headphones on, and I had this song came on, and because you can listen to the radio on a CD player, but, in the do you have
Later, yes,
yeah, yeah. Well, okay,
later, but you could,
I was
yes.
listening to like one of the there's an oldie station they play stuff from like the 70s, 60s, 70s, and 80s,
Uh huh.
and I'd put it on there sometimes. So I was listening, and Walking By came on, and for whatever reason they played the whole song. They played the entire 14, 15 minutes, whatever it was. My mind was blown.
That's unusual.
I was blown away. It was
Yeah.
late night, so that might have been it, but I was completely blown away. I was like, this is like the greatest thing in the world.
Mm.
I mean, and yeah,
Oh, I have no trouble believing that because that's some of that stuff back then was just recorded
yeah,
incredibly well, and Bobby Brown in particular. Not so much the record after it. I mean, the record after it sounds fine. It
yeah,
sounds good for what it is. No shade. Sorry, Bobby. But "Don't Be
yeah,
Cruel" sounds so much better.
yeah.
It's like literally to me, like when I'm listening, if I'm listening to CDs and I want to have my ears tickled,
Hmm.
I'm listening to either "The Night Fly" by Donald Fagen, "Two Against Nature" by Steely Dan, "Asia" by
Good
Steely
stuff.
Dan, or I'm listening to "Don't Be Cruel" by Bobby Brown.
Yeah,
If I really want to have like that, if I want to have my ear balls tickled, as they say,
yeah.
like that's where I'm going. And I still have that very CD from ages ago, and It's
Still
not
holds
still it's
up,
not
huh?
even trashed. I was very nice to it, but
Huh.
this
That
is
would,
like '88.
yeah. So you still have that man.
I have that exact CD. Yeah,
Hmm.
I've been very good to it because it sounds so good. It's just like carrying it gently. It's just it's such a nice sounding CD. And there were
Yeah.
a lot of them back then that sounded good. Nothing as good as that, but there were a lot of really good sounding CDs. I mean, they, to their, to their credit, like, MCA back then, because it wasn't a universal property at that point, but
Right.
MCA kind of had that figured out. They figured out CD pre-mastering very, very quickly, and so like anything that came out that was on MCA at that point sounded good, like
Hmm.
really, really solid. Even the stuff that Warner's came out with back in the '80s that made it to CD after the fact sounded really pretty good. And we didn't realize how good, but it was all really good. Like they did it right the first time,
Yeah.
which is kind of unusual. And it turns out that a lot of these things that are digitally remastered, except for the stuff I do, but a lot of the stuff that came out as digitally remastered actually doesn't sound as good.
Hmm.
It's actually just louder. They just turned up the volume on it. Like that's not better.
Yeah,
That's
because I used to always wonder, like, I can't really tell the difference. Like, it sounds the same to me. And what is the other sound, like the stereo sound? That always kind of sounded weird to me too.
what do you mean?
Like I know, like I'd just hear a song and like it was like a stereo, it was like this like stereo sound. Like it doesn't sound very good.
Well,
Like,
I mean, everything after everything kind of from 65, 66 forward was coming out in stereo.
oh, okay.
You must be talking about like some kind of after the fact processing or something. It was
Yeah, it was an
making it
After Effect
phasey
process.
and weird.
Yeah, and it didn't look like I didn't really care for the sound that often, or I didn't care for the sound at all when I was listening to it. I'm like, kind of sounds kind of weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were, again, without getting too Greek, like there was Heiko processing that was a big deal in the '70s, and thankfully it didn't last very long. And
I
then
I
there were
I, I do like the sound of AAC though.
the compression. It's a compression
Yeah, I like
format.
that. I think that's a very crisp sound. I like that a lot.
I mean, at the end of the day, like that just kind of that comes down to whatever the source is.
Yeah.
So, but when it comes down to the sound of CDs, like I think that period was probably the best for showing what CDs were capable of, and really even at the end of the day, and I'll ask you about this one too, like just kind of based on your knowledge as a listener, like how do you think that CDs affected the way that music was recorded?
How it was recorded or how it was consumed. I can
How it was probably how it was consumed. Let's just do that.
because okay, so I know the city. Back when I was teenager, late '90s, early 2000s. I started to see a lot more of like the best of. I started to see a lot of that, and so I can imagine that probably took away from the overall sales of an artist. So instead of having to buy like, hey, I got to buy the second album and listen to this particular song, I can just buy the best of CD, and I can listen to all their the greatest hits without having to skip through 4 or 5 songs or whatever. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You started to see that a lot, and then like you said, the Motown's greatest hits things. I remember I owned a similar CD that played it was like a Temptations album and then a Four Tops album, back to back. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so you were getting a lot of that. And then obviously, I kind of touched on that, about 5-10 minutes ago when I discovered the art of burning the CD. I know that really, really changed the way music was consumed or how it was purchased. And yeah, because I was doing a lot of that in high school, and I was actually making some money off of that as well. Little side hustle, but
Dag. We'll
but
get to
yeah,
it.
but yeah. As far as like how it was, like how music was recorded, I can't really get into the terminology. That's more your thing, but I just know it really played a big part in the way I consumed music and how I purchased it. The CD.
Oh, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very much the same here. And you're right. I mean, there was this preponderance of because in some cases, like if it was like the Bruce Springsteens of the world, or
Hmm.
the Michael Jacksons of the world, or the George Michaels of the world, or the Madonnas of the world, like their
Right.
stuff was gonna come out on CD, of course.
Right.
But the other stuff that was kind of more niche,
Hmm.
it would take longer for that stuff to surface. I remember looking for Bobby Caldwell's first record on CD, and it took forever to get it because it just wasn't available right away. And the
Yeah.
company that held the rights to it barely existed by that point. So they didn't have the
Mhm.
muscle to put it out. It wasn't until he bought his albums, like the masters, the whole thing,
Yeah.
that he was finally able to put them out on his own label, and they showed up and they don't sound good. None
Really,
of them.
not even on CD. They don't sound good.
No, no, his on vinyl they sound fine, but the
Oh, okay.
CDs are just they just hiss like cockroaches. They're not good. None of them
Hmm.
are. Um,
Fortunate.
it is, yeah, it
Yeah.
really really is because they're using those same digital files or at least something comparable to them
Hmm.
on like Spotify and Apple Music, and like that's how the kids are having to hear it. And it's just
Right.
if they only heard the LP, like it's so much better that way. There's you don't get nearly so much hiss.
Yeah.
It's just like they rushed through it to get it out on CD, and it doesn't sound good at all. It
Yeah.
just I don't even have the CD anymore. I bought it thinking it'd be great, and I heard the beginning of "Come to Me," and I just thought this is hissing like a cockroach. Like this is terrible. And then I went back to "Special to Me," which is the first thing on the album. Thought, man, more hiss. This sucks. And
Yeah.
I literally threw it in the trash. It was so bad.
Oh wow.
So I hated it. I didn't enjoy it. And then I went and found I found an LP of it that was in really good shape, and that's like I dumped that into once that was possible. I couldn't do it right away, but once it
Hmm.
was possible to digitize music, I just dumped that myself, and that's what I still listen to this day. If I want to listen to that record, that's how I listen to it. Either I pull the vinyl out or I listen to my digital dumps from years ago.
Okay.
So it didn't. The CD was not a revelation for everything. It didn't work for everything because
Okay.
the mastering engineers or the record labels or whatever rushed through certain things just to get them out the door. And there's a sucker born every minute, and they know that if you put it out there on a shiny new format, that people are going to
People are
buy
gonna.
it anyway.
Right.
Even and there many people are not going to even notice that
Yeah.
it doesn't sound as good as their LP did. You're just going to think of your vinyl and the clicks and the pops and ticks and stuff,
Yeah.
and you're going to think that that automatically makes it worse, and it doesn't. In a lot of cases, it doesn't.
I remember my grandfather would listen to was it Dinah Washington, and he had like he had one of those old school vinyl. It was like old vinyl. He played her stuff and Ella Fitzgerald, whatever, and you can just hear like the pops and the cracks and all that stuff. But he loved that though, man. He loved it. He said he would take it over like CDs every day of the week.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that to a certain extent.
Right.
I mean, I'm not going to stand on my lawn and yell at the kids for having their CDs,
Right.
but it's to a certain extent, I get what he liked about it.
Hmm.
There are limitations with CDs, and I mean, of
Yeah.
course, at 11, I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
And some CDs could work that way. You didn't really notice it so much, but on
Mhm.
some of them, you do.
Right.
While there is, forgive me for getting Greek, I have no choice. Um, so CDs will reproduce signal from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz.
Hmm.
But the problem is, while we can't hear anything higher than 20 kilohertz, at least not consciously. I mean, my
Right.
ears go up to about 18, which is pretty good for somebody as old as me.
Yeah.
I can perceive frequencies higher than 20K.
Okay.
It's kind of like, and this isn't totally accurate, but it's kind of like when you remember those old TVs with the cathode ray tubes in them, the old CRTs? You turn the TV on, but you'd have the volume down.
Hmm.
You're not really hearing that the TV is on, but you know it's on.
Yeah. You can feel like something you can sense or you can.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of thing, although that frequency lives right around like 13, 14K. But you're not necessarily hearing it, but you are perceiving it. And it's those perceptible frequencies that give music life.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sound of the room the music was recorded in. The room has a sound,
Mm-hmm.
and the CD isn't going to give you that. It's going to give you just, excuse me, just the sound of the music itself,
Yeah.
but you won't necessarily get the room that the music was recorded in. And when you take, like, for instance, the two-channel master of an album, like, say I have the two-channel analog master,
Right.
stereo left and right, of Don't Be Cruel by Bobby Brown. That tape, if you play that tape next to the CD, it will sound different. Further, the tape will sound better
Hmm.
because there's more information on that tape that the CD simply can't reproduce. It just can't.
Yeah.
There are limitations with CDs. And in some cases, depending on how well the album was pressed or the vinyl or the LP was pressed, you can actually get a lot of those additional signals onto the LP. I won't get too deep into that, but there was a company called Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs that used to make records, and they used to use a process called half-speed mastering. Most albums, I'm so sorry, most albums were done, and they were done quickly
Right.
to make as many of them as possible. Cassettes, especially, like they were literally running cassettes at, like 16, 18 times the speed that you would play them back, just to hurry up and get the information on. That's why they sounded so good, because they were done way too fast.
Yeah.
But with half-speed mastering, you're transferring, for lack of a better term, transferring the record at half the speed that you play it at.
Mm-hmm.
Records run at 33 and a third, so they were transferring them. Mobile Fidelity Sound Labs was transferring them at 16.
Mm-hmm.
If the cutting needle, if the cutting lathe and the needle is able to move at a slower speed, then you can get more of the music on it because it's moving more slowly. You
Right.
follow? So you could get more information into the groove, and this was especially, it was all the better if
Mm-hmm.
you didn't have as much music on a single side. Um, and this will kind of go into the next thing about CDs. But generally, it's kind of expected, like 13 to 15 minutes on one side of vinyl will get you the best possible sound.
Okay.
I'll go into that more in a minute too, into something that most people can relate to. But if you go further than that, you start pushing it to like 25 minutes or something like that, you have to take something away because you can't fit all the sound onto vinyl the way it's coming off the tape. So you
Right.
have to take something away. And generally what was taken away was low frequency. So they'd roll off or take away low frequency in order to get all of the songs on the album without the needle skipping over it.
Interesting.
It really is, because often in order to get all the music on, you would have to make the grooves closer together.
Yeah.
But you can't do that and keep all the bass because the needle's just going to skip off the record. I've actually seen bad mastering jobs where that's happened. But and I mean, I'm talking test pressings, not
Yeah.
albums that were released to the public. But we'd have to, as cutting engineers and as mastering engineers and even as recording engineers like myself, you'd have to be very careful about how you recorded things because the ultimate medium was an LP. You were aiming for the LP or aiming.
Mm-hmm.
No, none of us were aiming for cassettes. Engineers hated cassettes. We all did. But we were, because we knew that no matter what we did was only going to sound so good on a cassette.
Mm-hmm.
But we could kind of get there on an LP, and that made it okay. We just have to be careful about how bassy we were, how much low frequency we put on that tape, because if the cutting engineer saw too much bass, and again, we're talking 10 tracks off of an album. They were
Yeah.
generally between 10 and 12 tracks. Most of them were 10 for lots of reasons. We'll go there later. And it wasn't all sonic. But in order to get that, so you're figuring, like take Thriller, for example. This is a perfect example of this. So they do the test press of Thriller, and they've constructed what they believe to be this perfect album, and I don't think they're wrong. But
Yeah.
they've constructed this perfect record they've worn themselves out on this thing. I mean, it was a
Hmm.
science experiment taken to the 100th degree. It's got a little bit of everything on it. Everybody can enjoy this thing. White,
Yeah,
brown, purple, green.
yeah,
Like everybody's gonna like this record. And it's perfect, and they're done. They're so happy with it. And Michael Jackson is over the moon about this record, and he knows it's gonna outperform Off the Wall as well as that did.
yeah.
It's not like that just sold a few copies either. That was wildly successful, and to me, the better record.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh, easily.
right, I had
Yeah,
a feeling you'd agree with me there.
yeah.
But the record, after they're done with it, the 2-channel master, which is the result of the mixes that have been painstakingly gone over, right?
Hmm.
This tape, this 2-channel master with all the songs on it, goes off to the mastering lab to be put on a record. And they used to do what were called test pressings. In other words, I think you can tell just by context what that would be. That's
Hmm.
just, let's see how this sounds on a record, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so the record came back, and they were all excited to get it. It took a little while to get it back, but they got them back. And so they put the thing on to listen to it. Side one sounds meh.
Hmm.
Side two is a disaster. It
Really?
sounds terrible. It's muffled. There's no low end. Michael Jackson was reduced to tears and he ran out of the studio.
I can see.
But but it's understandable. Think of it. If you're
That's
in
true.
that
That's your blood, sweat, and tears. I can see that.
and you're engaged like that, and this is your heart and soul on this
Right.
album, and it sounds like that. I mean, I could imagine as a sound engineer, I can imagine how I would feel. I would be gutted.
Yeah.
And we need to fix this. And oh, by the way, CBS is waiting for Thriller. Like, come on, y'all. Like, you're on a deadline. Like, I need
Right.
this album. And it sounds like that. And they're scratching their heads trying to figure out what to do about this. I mean, I can put myself in that room very easily as a sound engineer because I know how that feels. And so they had to make some decisions about that second side. The first
Hmm.
side they could kind of work with that, and
Yeah.
they did, and that sounded good. That was
Hmm.
fine. It was the second side that was really the problem. So the first thing they decided to do was cut down Billie Jean a little,
Hmm.
edit it down. Now, if you buy the 12-inch, if you can find it, and they're out there, the 12-inch of Billie Jean, I have it here. The intro is actually a lot longer.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
You remember that? The 12-inch single was actually not a 12-inch version. It was actually the intended album version that you
Okay.
heard. And so they did that. So they cut down Billie Jean a bit, and it killed Michael to do it because he wanted you to dance.
Yeah.
And he knew that groove was ridiculous because it
Right.
is. And you wouldn't care how long it was. You just loved the song more. He was right. But it had to. He had to do something. And they begrudgingly decided to just cut it down. And Michael and Quincy fought about it at first because Michael didn't want to do that at all.
Yeah.
But he finally agreed to do it, and they get another test press, and it still sounds bad. So what do we do now?
What song did they cut? I'm curious to know what song they cut from Thriller.
Let me look. And so they decide let's take a listen to this last track
Hmm.
because everything else is reasonably timed, and we can't cut beat it.
No,
Um, how would you do that?
that's the rock
Big,
audience right there.
yeah, that's part of an audience you're trying to court. You can't cut
Right.
it. But "Lady in My Life," let's listen to that.
Was that even on the original? I'm trying to,
Yes, it was. You're
because that wasn't
thinking
because
there
that
was
wasn't even a single. Was that even a single at the beginning?
no, it wasn't.
Okay.
There was a song called "Carousel," which was originally supposed to be on the record. It was written by Michael Sembello,
Okay.
and that was originally tracked for the album, and was supposed to make the record. And then hold on. Let me hold on to that one for a minute because I'm going
All
to
right.
forget the other thing, but I'll get there. So they take a listen to "Lady in My Life." "Lady in My Life" originally was over 6 minutes long.
Yeah, I can see that. Because even the version now is kind of long.
Yeah, it's long and it's like 4 minutes and 40 seconds,
Right.
40 something seconds. But originally it was a lot longer. It originally had a traditional structure. It
Hmm.
had a first verse, it had a chorus, it had a second verse and a chorus and a bridge, and then out choruses and the vamp, all that.
Yeah.
That went on to kind of close the tune off. And it's perfect like that. It's so good like that. And this is funny, if you look at the original version, the original LP of Thriller, you'll actually see lyrics for the first verse and the chorus. They're on the sleeve, but you just
Uh,
don't hear it.
I need to go check that out.
I have it. Go to my website, and you'll see it there because I have an original version of Thriller, and
Right.
if you go there, it was a CBS half-speed master, and if you look at the sleeve, it has the original lyrics for the first verse and the bridge that you don't hear. What you get is you get the first. Okay, it was the second verse and the first chorus that you don't get, if I'm not mistaken. But you end up with "There'll Be No Darkness Tonight," which is the beginning of the first verse,
Hmm.
and then you get the second chorus. Um, um, Remind me. You know this, because I'm used to hearing it the full way. Um,
I'm drawing a blank too.
so let me keep you warm through the shadows of the night. That's how the chorus that everyone is most familiar with begins. To you, the listener that got the end product, that's the first verse and the first chorus. And then it goes right into a bridge. And I remember thinking even as a kid, going, what happened? This isn't form. What happened? And then when I was looking at the sleeve, I went, that's what happened.
Hmm.
They cut something. But I didn't know like why they would. And it turns out that they had to cut it in order to make it fit on the vinyl so it would sound good, because everything else was suffering because that song was too long. They didn't want to make the song go away.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that it was a trigger effect like that, like a chain effect. Like like a song being too long could affect other songs enough. That's crazy.
Yeah, it does, because you figure, again, as we said earlier, you have to space the grooves more closely together in order to make everything fit. They certainly weren't going to cut a whole song. That was out of the question. I
Yeah.
mean, everything else save Lady in My Life was a single.
Yeah.
And they liked Lady in My Life too much to completely let it go, and I understand why. I love that song. That and
Yeah.
Baby Be Mine are just incredible songs.
Those sound more of like an off the wall record anyway.
Thank you. Like
Yeah.
I agree with you.
PYT as well. PYT sounds more like an off the wall thing.
And that's probably what they were thinking. Like, we need connecting tissue to get you from Off the Wall to Thriller,
Right.
and this
And
is
to
how we're
retain
going to
those
do it.
fans and to retain those fans so you don't think, oh, Michael just completely sold out.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, I hadn't thought of it that way, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that was the thought process. So
Yeah.
they didn't want to remove the tune, so they
Yeah.
just cut stuff off of it. And if you go, excuse me, if you go online, you can find the original version. There's a publisher's CD put out called "The Songs of Rod Temperton" that I managed to find on eBay, and boy, did I pay for it, because I wanted it. I wanted that original version. And it turns out that it's just a really bad cassette dub of the
Mm.
full version of Lady in My Life. It doesn't sound great, but the whole thing is there. Have you heard it? The whole
No,
version?
I've heard. Mm-mm.
Bro, go to YouTube. It's there. The whole thing is there. It's so much better that way. Like, Rod Temperton was all about mood when he would arrange things and write things.
Yeah.
And you need that whole thing. There's a whole other, the first chorus you've never heard. Neither have you heard the second verse. Those are the two things that were cut out of it in order to make it fit on the vinyl. And it's just genius writing. It's such a better song full than it is cut like that.
Hmm.
So kids, look online, go to YouTube. It's on YouTube. You can hear it. And it's great that way. But that's what they had to go through back then. We had to be, as recording engineers, especially as mastering engineers, and producers had to be very cognizant of how many songs, of how long the songs were, where they were placed, how they were sequenced. It used to be, if you notice on the end of most records, ballads were placed on the end of each side by the runoff groove
Mm.
because they weren't as loud and they took up less space because they were softer.